So sometimes the noise tends to drown out the good news around here. People may turn on their TVs and they think that all that we do here in this bubble is spend our time focusing on one thing at one time or, bickering with each other about one thing. The reality is that there is some very important work getting done here to improve people's lives. Let me just give you some examples. An overhaul of the way that the Veterans Administration works so that veterans get the better care that they deserve and the treatment that they deserve. 14 separate measures to strike bad regulations from the books, with one more coming on the way. A big down payment on rebuilding our military, and we are building on that this week right now. The biggest increase in border security funding in years, which we are also building on this week. More resources to fight the opioid epidemic. More resources to expand charter schools and to save the DC School Choice Program. We have passed our plan to repeal and replace Obamacare, which is a very, very important promise for us to keep. Our plan to replace Dodd-Frank with real relief for small businesses and community banks on Main Street. We've passed the biggest expansion of the GI Bill in a decade, removing time limits for veterans to use their benefits, because in this 21st century, lifelong learning is essential. Reforms to toughen enforcement of our immigration laws, including Kate's Law. Reforms to impose additional penalties on sex traffickers and increase support for victims, because human trafficking is a real problem. Reforms to improve job training and expand career and technical education. Tougher sanctions on hostile regimes. And in addition to all of this, our committees are working on transformational tax reform, the biggest thing that we can do for our workers and for our economy. I know that this is a long list. There's more to this list. But if you just go to didyouknow.gop, didyouknow.gop, you can cut through the clutter and you can learn more about all of this work that is being done here in the House. These are real wins to solve real problems that people care about. And even if this isn't always being reported, even if it's getting lost in the clutter, in the distractions, that is what we are doing, one day at a time, one step at a time. And as always, we will continue to raise our gaze and keep at it, because we were elected to solve people's problems, and that's what we're focused on doing. Does anyone have any questions? Wong.
Speaking of some of those distractions, the new communications director of the White House, Mr. Scaramucci, appeared to take aim at your good friend, Mr. Prager, the chief of staff, suggesting he might have been behind some of the leaks coming out of the White House. Do you think those were appropriate comments for the new communications director to make?
Well, I've only heard about this. I'm not sure what the whole interplay is. All I would say is, as you know, Reince is a very close friend of mine. Reince is doing a fantastic job at the White House, and I believe he has the president's confidence. So if those two gentlemen have differences, my advice would be to sit down and settle your differences. I think Reince is doing a great job as chief of staff. Casey.
The Senate has dramatically scaled back what they were trying to do on health care. Does skinny repeal actually fulfill the promise you've been making for 7 years?
I'm going to reserve judgment until I see what the Senate actually produces. As you well know, they're about to go into their votorama, which is all of these amendments. It is anybody's guess what they come out with. So we're going to reserve judgment until we see what the Senate actually produces.
Would repealing the individual mandate without a replacement break the...
I'm going to reserve judgment until I see what they actually produce.
Ryan, on that note, if the Senate does end up, it's sort of up in the air right now, but passing something, I mean, is there any chance you would keep the House in potentially this weekend?
Yes, extending our session is obviously an option that we're considering. I think the majority leader will make some tentative announcements on that later on. The question is, what does the Senate do? We don't know what the Senate's going to do, so therefore we will reserve judgment as to what our response is until we find out what the Senate actually does. So, Drucker, you got a scarf there? I can't see her. There it is. All right, just making sure. I was going to say, I don't read that stuff. Okay. Did he tweet about that? Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm just joking with you.
The sanctions bill does a number of things, but one of the things it does is severely limit the president's flexibility and authority to lay sanctions and dispense sanctions against Russia. I wanted you to talk about the thinking of the House now that this bill is passed, in passing a bill that does that, because it is very unusual for the Congress to limit the president's flexibility.
I think what you saw was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 419 to 3, I think. So you had all but 3, I think the Republicans, all but 3 voted for tough sanctions on these three regimes, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. The message coming from Congress on a bipartisan basis is these are hostile regimes and sanctions are warranted. Sanctions are called for. And we want to make sure that they're tough sanctions, that they're endurable sanctions. And that's why I think it took us a while to figure this out, to come together to get the policy right. There were some constitutional issues with the Senate. We got through those, and we all agreed we believe these tough, hostile regimes deserve sanctions, and this is the bipartisan compromise that produces that, and that's why I think you got this big vote count.
Aren't you also saying, though, to the president to take a tough line?
No, I think what we're saying is we need to sanction these regimes because of what they've done, whether it's North Korea, Iran, or Russia. Yeah.
Skinny's heard that Steve Bannon is looking for a 44% tax rate for the top bracket. What are your thoughts on that?
Last thing I'm going to do is negotiate tax reform in public. You know me all too well. Our tax writers are going to be the ones writing this bill. We're working to get consensus as a framework so that our tax writers, Ways and Means, and Senate Finance can actually go write this legislation. And what we're not interested in doing is negotiating in public what those committees will be doing. So, Deirdre.
Speaker Ryan, do you agree with the president's new policy banning all transgender employees from
Well,
serving in the military?
the problem here, or the concern here in the House, was whether or not the military will be forced to pay for these surgical procedures. I share those concerns. The question on the broader issue, that is being reviewed by the DOD and the White House, and I look forward to seeing what it is that they actually produce.
Last question.
The DOD is reviewing this with the White House. I want to see what it is they actually produce.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Graham earlier today said he was looking at legislation that would create some roadblocks to firing the special counsel, some sort of review process. Do you think that the House needs to act preemptively to make it harder to?
I haven't given thought to that. I think it's in the president's interest that he stay where he is and that he continues and does his job.